The most dangerous man in this country is not the one who owes $1 million. It is the one who owes nothing at all. Sit with that for a second, because it does not make sense. It should not make sense. We have been told our whole lives that debt is the disease and thrift is the cure. Pay your bills. Build your credit. Play by the rules. And yet somewhere tonight, a man with a paid-off house, a paid-off truck, and $0 owed to anyone on this earth is being quietly flagged as a risk, not a hero, a risk. And a man 3 states over carrying $80,000 in revolving debt, minimum payments spread across 4 cars he cannot keep straight, is getting approved for whatever he wants, same day, no questions asked. You already know a version of this. Maybe it happened to you. Maybe it happened to your brother, or the guy you used to work with who did everything right, and still got treated like a ghost by every bank in town. Let me tell you about a man named Walsh. Walsh is 58 years old. He spent 31 years as a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant, the kind of job that used to come with a handshake and a pension, and now comes with neither. He paid off his house in his 40s by sending extra principal every single month, the way his father taught him. He drives a truck he bought used and owns outright. He carries 1 debit card. That is the whole financial picture. No credit cards, no car note, no student loan hanging around from a degree he never finished, no lines of credit, no leverage anyone can pull on him. Last year, Walsh needed to relocate for 6 months to help his aging mother and take a temporary assignment closer to her. He applied to rent a modest apartment. He was denied, not because of bad credit. He had no credit. The algorithm looked at a man who owed nothing to anyone on the planet, and it could not process him. There was no file, no history of borrowing and repaying, no trail of interest payments proving he was a good little customer. So the system did what systems do when they cannot categorize a man. It called him a risk and moved on to the next applicant, one with a thin credit file full of late fees and revolving balances, who got the apartment the same afternoon. Think about what that actually means. The man who was completely free, debt-free, untouchable, judgment-proof in every sense that matters, was treated as suspicious. The man bleeding $60,000 a year in interest payments was treated as trustworthy. If that strikes you as backwards, you are finally seeing the machine for what it is instead of what you were told it is. Because here is the truth nobody sat you down and explained. The system was never built to measure whether you are financially healthy. It was built to measure whether you are financially useful. And a man with no debt, no monthly payment, no leverage owed to anyone is not useful. He generates no interest. He carries no balance. There's nothing to extract from him. To the people who build this machine, that man is not a success story. He is a leak in the system, a dollar that got away. You were taught that paying off your debt was the finish line. Nobody told you that crossing it would make you invisible to the very system you spent your life trying to satisfy. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. Every credit application, every rental screening, every so-called trust score you have ever filled out starts to look less like a measurement of your character and more like a measurement of your usefulness to somebody else's balance sheet. So how did we get here? Who decided that a man who owes nothing should be treated as more suspicious than a man drowning in payments? That did not happen by accident, and it did not happen recently. To understand it, you have to go back to a very specific year a very specific place, and a decision that most people watching this never learned the full story of. The year is 2008. The place is a mortgage servicing office in a mid-sized American city, the kind with a name you have heard but never visited, one of a few thousand nearly identical offices sitting inside a nationwide machine that had spent the better part of a decade convincing ordinary families that their house was not a home. It was a line of credit with a roof on it. A man we will call Marsh worked in that office. He had spent 18 years in banking, moving up the way people used to move up, one promotion at a time, one file at a time, until he was managing a portfolio of home equity lines for a mid-sized regional lender. In the years leading up to 2008, Marsh watched his own bank push homeowners over and over to draw against the equity in their houses, not to survive an emergency, to buy a boat, to remodel a kitchen that did not need remodeling, to pay off one credit card with a new line secured against the house itself, so the debt did not disappear. It just moved somewhere the bank could see it and profit from it twice. Marsh watched families who had paid down their mortgages for 15, 20 years get talked into refinancing that progress away, pulling equity out at variable rates. Because a loan officer had a quota and a homeowner had a kitchen he was embarrassed about at dinner parties, the bank did not call this debt. They called it unlocking value. They called it leveraging your asset. The language was soft. The mechanism underneath it was not. Every dollar of equity pulled out of that house was a dollar the bank now earned interest on, a dollar the family now owed on top of a mortgage they had already been paying for 2 decades. Then the market turned. Home values fell in some regions by 30%, in others by more. And the families who had been talked into pulling equity out of their homes discovered the value that had backed those loans had simply evaporated. They now owed more than the house was worth on a loan stacked on top of a mortgage, with a monthly payment that had not moved an inch, even though their net worth had been cut in half overnight. Marsh sat in his office that year, processing foreclosure after foreclosure on families who had done exactly what the bank told them was smart. He did not process a single file on anyone who had refused to draw equity out of a paid-off house. Not one. The people who got destroyed in 2008 were, disproportionately, the people who trusted the system enough to use it the way it was marketed to them. This is the part you need sitting with. The families who came out the other side of 2008 intact were not the clever ones or the lucky ones. They were the boring ones, the ones who kept their mortgage balance low, who refused the home equity line the bank offered them 3 separate times, who felt, honestly, a little embarrassed at dinner parties for not remodeling the kitchen. The system had spent years quietly training everyone to see that caution as a character flaw. 2008 is the year the bill came due, and it came due specifically for the people who trusted the machine most. The mechanism is identical today. Only the names have changed. You are not being offered a home equity line this year. You are being offered a buy now, pay later plan at checkout, a pre-approved credit line stapled to your paycheck, a car loan disguised as a lease so the payment looks smaller than it is. It is the same play. Convert an asset or an income stream into a monthly obligation. Dress the obligation up as opportunity and collect interest on money that used to belong entirely to you. The bank in 2008 did not care whether the homeowner ended up underwater. The lender today does not care whether you end up making minimum payments until you are 70. The mechanism was never about you winning. It was about you staying attached to the meter. Here is why that history matters to you specifically, right now, whatever your current balance sheet looks like. If you lived through 2008, some part of you already knows this in your body, even if nobody ever explained it to you in words. You remember the neighbor whose house went up for auction. You remember thinking it could not happen to careful people, and then watching it happen to careful people. What you may not have connected until this moment is that the entire system that punished them was engineered deliberately to make caution look foolish and leverage look smart, right up until the moment leverage became the thing that buried them. So let's talk about how the machine actually works, mechanically, because once you see the gears, you cannot go back to seeing this as bad luck. Picture your financial life as a single word on a spreadsheet somewhere you will never see. That word is not your name. It is a category. Lenders, landlords, insurers, even some employers now, are not evaluating you as a person. They are evaluating a probability. The probability that you will generate revenue for them over time. A man with no debt generates zero revenue. A man paying minimum payments on 3 cars for the next 11 years generates a predictable, steady stream of interest income. And that predictability is worth more to the system than your dignity, your character, or your track record of doing the right thing. This is not a conspiracy in the sense of men in a back room plotting against you personally. It is simpler and, honestly, worse than that. It is engineering. Somebody built a model decades ago that treats consistent debt service as the definition of trustworthiness. Because from a lender's chair, that is exactly what trustworthiness looks like. Nobody needed to conspire against you. They just needed to build a system that rewards behavior profitable to them and label anything else as a gap in the data. You became collateral damage of a definition, not a target of a plot, and somehow that is colder, not warmer. Let me show you the other side of this same trap, because I do not want you thinking this only punishes the debt-free man. It punishes everyone, just differently. There is another man, we will call him Cordero, 54 years old, a regional sales manager for most of his career, 6-figure income at his peak, the kind of guy who did everything the financial magazines told him to do. He carried a mortgage he refinanced twice to lower his rate. He carried a car payment because the dealership told him leasing preserved his cash flow. He carried 2 credit cards he paid off every month, on time, without fail, for over a decade, because he had been taught that responsible use of credit was the golden path to a strong score. He trusted every institution that told him this was the smart way to live. Then the layoff came. Not because he underperformed. Because his division got absorbed after a merger, and his role, along with 400 others, simply ceased to exist on a Tuesday morning, with a severance package that ran out in 5 months. Suddenly, the mortgage payment, the car payment, and the 2 credit cards he had always paid off in full were due on income that no longer existed. He was not reckless. He was not lazy. He had spent his entire career doing precisely what he was told would protect him. And the same system that had praised him for carrying manageable debt for 15 years turned on him within 90 days of that income disappearing, because the entire arrangement had only ever worked as long as the paycheck kept flowing into it. Walsh got punished for having no leverage anyone could pull. Cordero got punished for having leverage that depended entirely on an employer who owed him nothing in return. 2 different men. 2 completely different financial pictures. The exact same lesson underneath both of them. Any structure that requires a monthly payment is a structure somebody else can use to control your life, whether that structure is debt itself or a paycheck you built your entire debt load around. Here's the part that should make you angry. This is not two separate bad breaks. It is the same design working exactly as intended on two different kinds of people. The system does not need you to be reckless to catch you. It only needs you to be dependent on your credit file to be seen as trustworthy, dependent on your paycheck to service your obligations. Either way, the moment that dependency gets interrupted, whether by an algorithm that cannot categorize you or an employer that no longer needs you, you discover the same brutal fact. You were never actually secure. You were leveraged. And leverage only feels like security while the person holding the other end of the rope is still smiling at you. And here is the turn, the part that changes how you should be looking at everything we've covered so far. The reason a man with no debt and no dependency carries himself differently in a room, the reason he does not flinch when a difficult conversation comes up at work, the reason he can walk away from a bad deal, a bad boss, or a bad landlord without his voice shaking, is not about manners or confidence coaching. It is math. A man who needs nothing from the room cannot be leveraged by the room. That is the entire secret behind what people call presence. It is not a personality trait. It is the visible outcome of having no monthly payment anyone can hold over him. This is why the social code your father's generation carried, the quiet, unbothered authority some older men still have without ever raising their voice, did not come from some mysterious, old-world charm. It came from a much simpler place. Fewer of them were leveraged the way you are leveraged now. Somewhere around the early 1960s, the advertising industry, discovering that a satisfied, debt-averse customer was a bad customer, began systematically reframing thrift as embarrassment and restraint as failure to keep up. Over about 15 years, the quiet, self-contained man who needed nothing from anyone stopped being the aspirational figure in every advertisement and became the punchline. Not because that code stopped working, because it worked too well, and a man who required nothing could not be sold anything. That did not happen by accident, and it did not stay in the 1960s. It is the exact same mechanism running today every time you see an ad, quietly implying that the man with the newer truck, the bigger house, the better watch, is the man who has arrived, while the man driving the paid-off truck is somehow behind. He is not behind. He is the only one in the room the system cannot move. So what do you do with all this? Not a checklist, not 3 steps. This is not that kind of close, and if you came looking for one, I think you already know why it would miss the point. Walsh, the man denied that apartment, did not need a system to vouch for him. He needed 6 more months before the temporary assignment ended, and he moved back near his mother, mortgage-free, debt-free, answering to nobody. The denial stung. It did not break him, because there was nothing underneath him for it to break. Cordero rebuilt slower, on purpose this time. Without a car payment, without a mortgage, he could not have paid off in cash if he chose to. Both men ended up in the same place eventually. Untouchable. Not because either of them found a clever trick, because they stopped needing anything from a system that was only ever designed to measure their usefulness, never their worth. That is the actual choice sitting in front of you tonight. Underneath every bill, every offer, every pre-approved letter that shows up looking like an opportunity. Not whether you can afford the payment, whether you are willing to remain a category on somebody else's spreadsheet for the rest of your working life. Choose the payment, or choose to be unreadable. Choose the leverage, or choose to be untouchable. Choose what the advertisement is selling, or choose what your father's generation understood before anyone taught them to be ashamed of it, because a man who needs nothing from the system is the only man the system cannot control.